Hey, lovelies, Lucy Highland here. And today I want to talk about how getting into your creative flow can help you tap into and tune into the energies of your own human design chart. So, I'm an artist, an art therapist, and my work with human design is really looking at how creativity can now allow us to engage in human design and our human design charts in a different way, providing a bit of a fresh perspective. In my own experience, I spent up to about 10 years learning human design, sucking up every piece of information that I could. And it wasn't until I went to an immersion and I actually felt what it was to be me and what it was to be an experiment with different auras and what it was in terms of feeling and sensing to have open and defined centers, that my whole human design experience changed. And then I began merging my own experience as an artist, doing art meditations, doing mindful drawings, doing mindful weavings, that I began to realize that creativity can be a portal. It can be a portal that allows us to not just understand our human design experience, but actually blend that with a sensing. And we move into our internal world, into our internal creative beings, and we allow those creative beings to feed through the senses our experiences of what it is to be in our human design experiment. So today, I'm going to share with you a human design creative session that I ran a few months ago. It's taken me a while to actually post this up, because a lot of what I do is I really digest what I'm seeing from people in their imagery and how that shapes and forms my own understanding and interpretation of different aspects of the chart. And it's been a huge guide for me in my own human design experience. And that's really been the basis of why I've decided to go out there and ask people who are in their human design experiments to start drawing and creating their human design chart. So I'll just briefly introduce you to Charlotte. She approached me to do a human design session with her own creativity. She's actually a poet, and she wanted to see how drawing might provide a different outlet. And I just thought I'd show you her chart first. Really interesting chart, fascinating woman, incredible amount of energy, really knowing herself and understanding herself as a poet, and really knowing and understanding how important words were for her in terms of her own experiment. And so she had defined sacral through the 15-5, and that actually shows up really interestingly in her imagery. She then has the 25-51, and she has the 10-57. It's also interesting that you can actually see that her sun is in the 36 and her earth is in the 6, which again kind of comes into can be of interest when we look at the imagery. So how does this chart, what does this tell us about who we are and who we are in terms of creative beings? Because human design can talk about in terms of strategy and how we engage in our strategy, how we connect with our authority. But how do these things actually really present themselves? And how do we find ways of translating them from our inner experience into our outer experience? So this is the image that Charlotte engaged in. And one of the initial things that I really noticed was how important movement was for Charlotte. She would use quite a lot of her upper body to move and create these forms, lines, shapes around the page. And I thought that was really interesting because that's where she started. And she has the channel of the rhythm, the gate 15 and 5. And I could really see how this was an opener for her in terms of her chart. As she began to move, then I could see that she was beginning to connect in and to create more detail. So one of the first things that she created was the eyes. And even though they didn't necessarily look like eyes initially, she developed them over and over and again. And it was really interesting. She talked about herself being a witness, witnessing her own creative flow and witnessing what was emerging on the page. She also talked about the fact that the eyes felt like they were eyes in her head. And at the time, her own self-talk, what was going on in her world was, oh, Charlotte, this looks really silly. You're no good at this. What do you think you're doing? And because she was in her own creative flow, she was able to observe this more. And I think that's the really interesting thing about the creative process, is because we're actively engaged in something. And in this perspective, it's drawing. We're actively engaged in drawing. So we're very present in the drawing, but we're also able to do that, and we begin to start witnessing what else is happening in our body. So sometimes there might be particular sensations appearing certain parts of the body. Sometimes there might be a self-talk that emerges. Really interesting to see how these things emerge. It's almost like with the creative process, we distract ourselves enough from our usual perpetual self-talk that we engage in activity and we allow that to be our primary activity. And in that, we're able to create space and then begin observing other aspects. What became interesting as she started creating these little characters, and she was very much saying that in the flow, these characters began to emerge, and they were like life that she felt as she was creating, that she was alive. And I was thinking about that sacral energy, you know, that feeling of just being alive and having that energy, having access to that energy. And I could see how this was creating more and more shapes and forms on the page. But what became interesting is this kind of dark, wavy movement that happened across the page. And what emerged for Charlotte was the importance of the shadow, and how the shadow was creating a different type of form, a different type of complexity on the image and on the page. And I think I got really curious about that, because Charlotte has the gate 36, which is brightness hidden, which often has that kind of shadow aspect. And she had often, not worried, but she had often thought about that 36 and that the shadow aspect of her not being able to shine brightly, or being really cautious about shining brightly, having previously shone brightly for people who didn't acknowledge and see her light, and how often certainly Neptune has been in that gate for the last year or two, couple of years now. And there has been that aspect for us around, okay, where am I really being seen here in terms of who I am? Who's really seeing my light? And where am I wasting myself in terms of spreading my light, where it's clear that there's not any interest in that? And so as the session came to an end, she was really left with this feeling of the importance of the shadow. And after we finished, I touched base with her about a week later, as I always do in my sessions, and I asked her, you know, how are you getting on since? And she had actually created subsequent imagery that was based on this shadow. So the session with me had initiated her own creative process around the shadow, and she really began to acknowledge that Shadow helps create a form. So if there was only light, there would not really be a sense of proportion or scale or form. And she could really see how actually her son in 36 allowed her to give her perspective and a sense on her own existence by creating this dialogue relationship between the shadow and the light. So I thought that would be interesting, and I'm delighted to share that with you. And if you're interested in seeing more of my creative sessions and the artworks that come out of them, please leave me a comment below, or please share this with anyone who you think might be interested. Do like and subscribe my channel. I'll be putting up these creative human design session images again. And I always seek permission from those who I work with. Some people really see it as a way of being able to express and explore themselves in a much fuller and richer way, and are happy to share that. For others, it's very much a private process. So if you're interested in doing a creative design session, you can contact me and I'll provide those details below. Okay, looking forward to more creative human design sessions going forward. Thank you.